And we are live.
Oh, jolly good.
Once again.
Can't wait to get today's guests on here.
I know.
We've got them in the holding tank at the moment.
Absolutely.
To shake the fleas out just before we bring them on live.
So this month, May, as a lot of you may know, is Mental Health Awareness Month. And I think a lot of us, especially with a nutty sense of humor, take, having a good, not just a good brain and a good memory, but being aware of your surroundings and having good mental health. I think a lot of us take it for granted. Yeah. And we shouldn't.
No,
absolutely.
I know it's so important, obviously.
And today we'll be talking to doctors Nik and Eva Speakman, who are huge celebrities in the UK and about to do the same and cross the pond and take Hollywood and America by storm. And they have done some absolutely incredible stuff. If you don't follow them already, with the other 1.5 million people that do, head over to Instagram and look for the Speakmans. And without further ado, we'll be talking about mental health and having a giggle along the way. Here are our friends, Doctors Nik and Eva Speakman, live from the UK.
Hello.
And there they are now.
Hi, darlings.
Hello.
Lovely to see you.
Oh, lovely to see you both.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So what time of day is it where you are?
Oh, it is 7:30.
7:30, yeah.
7:30 p.m.
Okie doke.
It's 11:30 in the morning here.
Oh, you should be the ones with the wine then,
yes,
shouldn't you?
Instead of that.
Yeah,
I'll drink to that. Who was it used to say, I'll drink to that?
I've got a cup of Mrs. McCartney's tea.
That's it. Yeah.
Oh, good lad.
Jolly good.
Good lad, that'll do.
So how did you two, I'll ask Eva first, ladies first. How did you get into this whole, world of psychotherapy and helping people realize self-love and fears and phobias? What was the very beginning of that journey for you?
Well, the beginning of my journey was probably because I was somebody who really needed that help. In that I had quite a challenging childhood. I always had a home, always had food, etc. But life wasn't always very easy. And when I sort of went through my childhood, I had arachnophobia, I had a fear of heights, I had claustrophobia, I'd been bullied, so I had low self-esteem, body dysmorphia, I had an eating disorder because of that, and I was anxious, and so my life started that I felt incredibly broken, and then there came this point where my car got stolen. I've got this, I'm 20 years of age.
I'm 22, Eva, come on.
I was 2021.
Right.
And
22.
Okay, 22.
Yeah,
no,
come
I don't
on.
think so. But anyway, and I've got this great new job. And so on the outside, I looked all professional. I had a company car, and my car got stolen. And I was like, oh my God, what do I do now? And this was before the days of cell phones.
Yeah.
So I decided to go into this office, and I went into the office to see if I could use the telephone. And there is this guy there, smartly dressed, with a perm, and I asked if I could. Just
Kevin Keegan, one of the best footballers for Liverpool,
Yeah.
as well.
Right.
It's fashionable. A Kevin Keegan perm.
Oh, was it really? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So this person happened to be Nik, and in that moment, all I wanted to do was cry. But I thought, well, I've got to put my big girl pants on because I had a briefcase and a suit on. So and anyway, Nik was the person that kind of came to my rescue. Total stranger, helped me, and it was actually Nik that then introduced me into a field that he was already studying, of psychology. And that was how we met. That's how I started on the journey, because Nik slowly and systematically helped to fix all my issues.
Wow.
And now literally phobia free, not got an eating disorder. My confidence, is great. I no longer fear judgment. I no longer have health anxiety. I no longer have a fear of death and all the other things. And this was my knight in shining armor.
Oh,
how lovely.
And how many years ago was that, Nik?
That was 33 years ago. Actually, I can tell you it was the 30th of August 1991 when Eva walked into my office, and it was 3:15. I remember it exactly. So prior to that, I would tell you my story. I was Eva had all those traumas and so on. I had absolutely psychology textbook parents. My parents were absolutely amazing. Married for 56 years before my dad passed away. I could not have wished for anything better. However, as a child, I was really ill. I from birth, I had really bad eczema. Then I had bad asthma, and to the point that our first family holiday when I was 7, we were going to Blackpool, and my parents told me about the pleasure beach, and I got so excited about it. I brought on an asthma attack, and I ended up in Blackpool Hospital, and part of that time in the hospital, I was in intensive care, and one doctor said to my mum, "Mrs. Speakman, I don't think your son's going to make it." And that's quite a turning point for my mum, because my mum was amazing, but in that moment she became an overprotective mum, because she thought that at any moment I was going to die, and as a result of that overprotectiveness, if I cough, sneeze, and any signs of being ill, she would take me down to the doctors. And I spent the bulk of my childhood on a combination of antibiotics and cortisol steroids, which and now know, and I don't know why the doctors didn't know then, but the cortisol steroids stunted my growth. So because I wasn't growing like the other kids in my age, I used to have to go to hospital every month to be weighed and measured. And they were talking about putting me on a growth hormone program. Fortunately, they didn't. But my asthma started to get better when I got into the age of 16, 17 and so on. But I had so many antibiotics through that period of my childhood that it had a dramatic effect on my bowel, to the point that when I was 19, I started going to the toilet and just losing blood. And you know, a 19-year-old boy in that situation, no one talks about going to the toilet and those things. So I was quite embarrassed, and I didn't really do anything. My skin had turned grey, didn't really notice. And then one day I collapsed and I ended up in hospital. And
it's getting there.
I'll get there.
So
honestly, it's a long. Yeah, I'm trying to make it concise, but it's a real long story. You know, we already got to the age of 20. So I ended up in hospital. I got taken down to theatre. Back then, very amenema, and you know, I was back in the room, and this nurse said to me, "You're so lucky." And I said, "How come?" And she said, "Well, the gastroenterologist who's looking after you is a professor. He's probably the best in the UK. He lectures at 3 universities. There is nothing he doesn't know about bowels." He came to the room. He put the X-ray on the X-ray board, and he said, "You've got a condition called toxic megacolon, which basically you'd had an inflammatory bowel disease. It had gone into ulcerative colitis, and now basically your bowel is that ulcerated and perforated that it's got a rupture, and that can happen probably." He said, "You've got 6 or 8 weeks to live." And he said, "You probably notice your skin's gone grey because you become toxic because perforations in your bowel." And he said, "But don't worry, because
Don't worry,
don't worry." He said, "Because what we're going to do is take you to theatre. We're going to give you an ileostomy and a colostomy bag, and you'll be fine." And I said, "What else is there?" Because I don't really fancy one of those. And you know, over the years, I've spoken to so many people who have them, and I know they're fine, but it wasn't for me. I said, "What else is there?" And he said, "There's nothing else because bowels don't heal." And
oh my goodness.
So I was facing the situation, and unfortunately, all the time that I spent a lot of time off school because my mum kept me home, and we literally lived in a real short walking distance to the library where I lived. And I used to spend a lot of time in the library. And my dad always said to me, "If you want to know the answer to anything, Nick, go in the library." Yep. People spend their lives documenting things, and he said, "So you find the answer in there." So I made the decision. I signed myself out of hospital. I went into the library. I started reading medical books, and all the medical books said the same as what this professor did: that bowels don't heal. I had a cut on my finger at the same time, and I kept picking this cut. And I remember my parents would always say to me, "If you pick that scab, it won't heal." which led me to think, is that why bowels don't heal? Because from the moment that we're born, we never stop eating. So there's always something taking that process.
Right.
And I thought, well, nothing to lose. So I started fasting, and as I started fasting, and I was really on strong medication. I was on steroid enemas, which were horrific.
Oh God!
Yeah, you got. I don't need to explain. You've got the picture, and you're welcome, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's right.
I can't unsee Nick's bum now.
No, you can't, can you?
Well, I don't want to. Carry on, Nick. You're doing fine.
So anyway, so I fasted for a while, and I did start to feel better. And obviously, that's not going to work long term. So I started, I looked at what's the most basic of food, which is unprocessed rice, and I had small portions of rice every day, and then I introduced one food at a time. Long story short, at the end of 18 months, I totally transformed my diet. And I had 3 lists. I had foods that made me feel great, foods that made me feel ill, and foods that didn't really do anything. Transformed my diet to the foods that made me feel great, and I came off all the medication, and I've not had any since from my bowel. So
now at this point, you might be wondering, right, what is the backside got to do with the brain? But he's nearly there.
I'm nearly there, right? So what I realised is that, and I went back to see the consultant and said, do you remember me? And this is my journey, because I was really excited, because I thought I found something that you didn't know, and he was quite dismissive. And he was like, "Look, you've been very disciplined over this. Good for you." He said, "But most people, they're in a critical situation. We have to operate on them." And I'm like, "You told me I had 6 weeks before I was going to die," and you were like, "Well, yeah, but he was really dismissive. But what that did for me, and this is back now in 1981, I realised that information's flawed, right? I realised that all those books that I read that said bowels don't heal, right? They weren't entirely correct. So I started studying psychology, thinking, right, okay, well, and everything, I challenged everything that I did. Like, why, if I did something, I go, why have I just done that? Where does that come from? And ultimately, studying psychology, and I think probably one of the biggest debates in psychology is nature versus nurture.
Right.
And I sort of totally leant towards the nurture, because one study that had a massive impact on me, one psychologist was a guy called John Watson, who totally believed that we are the sum of our behaviors and the schemas that we create.
So basically, we're a product of our environment, which I absolutely was.
Yeah, and it's just gone from there, really. And through that journey, and realizing that, look, I'm going to question everything. It doesn't matter what it is, I'm going to question it. We've together created 3 of our own therapies, and the very exciting thing for us, like coming towards the end of this, is that one of our therapies now, as over the last 7 years, we've done 3 scientific studies comparing our therapy against a trauma therapy called EMDR, and we've now just completed a clinical study with PTSD patients, and 3 months on, the patients that received our therapy, and this is not us delivering it, is the psychologist in the Netherlands who are delivering the therapy in the hospital there. They've shown that our therapy is more effective than EMDR.
Which is the World Health Organization go-to therapy for trauma, and ours has been shown to be more effective. So we're incredibly excited about that.
So you're ultimately the success story, or the antithesis for shit for brains, aren't you?
If you want to put it that way. Yeah.
Nicely put, Ruth.
Yes, indeed.
That's where the shit came from. Yes, and so yeah, it's obviously been a long journey, but coming out the other end.
See what you did there.
See what I did. Yeah, it's we are very, very excited, because certainly in the UK, the baseline therapy in the NHS is cognitive behavioural therapy.
Our National Health Service.
Yeah, in the National Health Service, and that's been around since the 70s. And EMDR, which is the one that our therapy was compared with, was accepted in 1984, and there's not really been anything since. So to be able to
pioneer
a therapy that now like one clinical study away from meeting the nice guidelines which the government would accept,
Right.
is incredible.
Wow, that's quite an achievement. I mean, when I was growing up, you know, obviously I'm a good bit older than you guys, but you know, it would always be so and so bullied me. You know, well, walk it off. You know, go and scrub the kitchen floor. Right, was the answer. Or if you came home and said, you know, I got the cane at school today, my grandmother, her mother Edie, would say, well, you must have deserved it, and give her another wallop. You know,
me exactly the same.
His dad would say exactly
the same. Well, you deserved it, and I get a clip. You know, and that's how it was. And I don't know. We seem to be living in a world now where, you know, a lot of normal behaviours are being treated as something abnormal. You know, and a lot of normal behaviours are also being medicalised. And you know,
I read a shocking statistic the other day that 62% of America's population is on some form of sleep medication.
Wow.
Oh,
so high.
It's so high. And the sad thing is that sleep medication messes up the circadian rhythm, which goes on to make sleep even more problematic.
Right.
And whereas, and going back to where we first started with mental health, etc., quite often sleep can be affected because of our mental health, because of what's going on in our life right now.
That's right. Yeah.
And, you know, and so if we eradicate those issues or work through them, then we go back to being able to sleep without, you know, medication disturbing those kind of rhythms.
Yeah, I have a theory, and it's only my own personal opinion, but I think that because of what happened to Michael Jackson in his childhood, whereby his father Joe would come into the boys' room at 3 o'clock in the morning, he'd come home from a club or a bar or somewhere, and he'd want his Jackson 5 boys up in their pajamas dancing for daddy. He'd flip the lights on, throw buckets of cold water on them in the bed while they were from fast asleep to wide awake.
And throw cats.
No, that was somebody else.
Yeah.
And he'd wake them up with buckets of cold water in the middle of the night and then expect them to get up and dance and sing and rehearse. And so I think Michael became so addicted to surgery because he could get anesthesiology to put him out because he was a terrible insomniac. I think the poor guy wound up dying and looking like he looked because the only sleep he could get was if he was under the knife. I could be wrong, but
that's a reasonable theory to have.
It is, because if you know, and I sort of recall this even from my childhood, that quite often we would get woken up in the night because of parents arguing, etc. And so I got into a situation where I struggled to sleep because I wanted to be on high alert and aware so that, you know, I could protect my mum. And this was something that when we met, and like I said, when I met Nik, I had like an abundance of different issues. And one of the things that I discovered was that I hadn't quite resolved the fact that I don't need to stay awake anymore because I now live with Nik and I'm not back where I was.
Yeah. You're safe and you don't need to protect yourself or anybody else.
Exactly.
But until we recognise that, and it just came out in a conversation where you just said, but you know, I don't sleep very well. And I'm like, what? I mean, obviously, I never knew that because my head is full and I'm gone. Right. You know, and it was just, and Eva accepted it for so many years of her life.
Yeah, I should have known better, but I didn't. I was like, I just don't sleep well, so just get on with it. And it's only when I vocalized it to Nik and he said, well, hang on a second, you know that there's got to be an issue behind that. And we are a product of our environment. And if Michael Jackson was woken up at night, then there will be, he's going to be on high alert every time he goes to bed. So it does make it, you know, it could very well be that. It does make sense.
Well, and your adrenaline doesn't shut off and your heart rate doesn't slow down and you don't breathe properly and all of those things. And, you know, when I was, again, when we were both growing up, this sort of walk it off, never mind situation was the thing. But, you know, now I think that the world has come to accept that, you know, what happens to you as a child will have some knock-on effect in your life. I mean, look at when you guys were over here and cured her terrified fear of swimming pools. Yeah, it was astonishing.
And you know,
because you took me back to my childhood, and I remember the first time that my brother was standing in water up to his waist. I was on the beach and he shouted, I didn't know he'd dug a big hole and he was in it. And he dug another big hole where I was, just,
where she was going to be.
And he shouted, come on, come on in, it's fine, look, you see. And I ran forward and fell down that first hole. And I thought I was going to die. And from then on, I was terrified of being underwater.
Absolutely.
And you guys talked me through it. You encouraged me to go back to my earliest recollection of something happening to me connected with water. And it brought it all forward.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I always remember you talking about when that famous time when the Beatles were coming out of the water. Was it in the Bahamas?
Yes, and the filming of Help.
Help, that's right. Yeah.
Help, that's it, yeah. And you were there, but you couldn't watch it. You had to stay in the trailer.
Yeah. No, she's absolutely couldn't. We'd go on holiday to Spain or at that trip to the Bahamas, and Angie's deck chair, she was always easy to find if I went down to the pool looking for Ange, because her deck chair was always turned away from the pool. She just couldn't even sit and look at the water.
But it just shows you, doesn't it, how something from childhood can have such a monumental effect adulthood. And unless we challenge it and work on it and discover it,
absolutely.
Then and a phobia by definition, and phobias is probably what we're most well known for here in the UK, because it's something that we work with very frequently on television, because it's so visual. You have somebody with a fear, and then we work with them, and an hour later we've got them over their phobia, and we expose them to the thing that they were phobic to, and they're fine with it. However, phobias can have such a detrimental effect on life, and we tend to find that most phobias start between the ages of like 3 and sort of 15 is usually when you have an event. And then as children as well, we from a very young age are taught to risk assess. And what I mean by that is, look left and look right before you cross the road. Don't touch that fire. Don't do this. Don't. So you sort of are conditioned to risk assess. And then, like with you, Angie, you suddenly fall into a pit of water. Suddenly now you're risk assessing water, and unless you deal with it and find the cause, then it'll. And as I was about to say, the definition of a phobia is an irrational fear. So the way to overcome it is to rationalize what actually happened. And you accepted that the water was actually faultless. The thing that caused the issue was your brother.
Was your brother, right?
Yeah.
But so many of us, you just bury it in a part of your brain which is sort of like a lockbox, and you don't get it out and deal with it.
Absolutely.
And the thing is, and even if you try and deal with it, you tend not to see it in a different way, because that statement, you can't see the wood for the trees, is very apt when it comes to the brain, because you can only see it in one way. And I think the reason why most things come from childhood is that as a child we suffer with one-dimensional thinking. So which is why you can tell any child anything and they will believe you, right? That's why you can get away with so many things with children. Because of that, you can tell them all sorts of
stories.
I can't say on there because I don't know if there's any young kids watching, but children will literally believe anything. It's only when you reach adolescence, when you get like beyond that age 15 and so on, that you start questioning things, more aware of yourself and the world.
Right.
And you look at things from a two-dimensional perspective. But the things that you've created prior to that, if you look back at them, you are still locked in the time that they were created, which is the one-dimensional way. Which is why, I know that Angie had looked back many times at, when it started, the fear of water. But every time you look back at it, you look back in the same way. And what we did, we made you look back in a two-dimensional way. Yeah. And that's what got you out of it.
Right.
That's right.
I still don't know. I mean, my fear that you guys worked on, which is fine now, is falling downstairs.
I had totally forgotten about that. I mean, that was 4 years ago.
And I think obviously that comes from, that's just intrinsic in humans. Fear of falling is just something we're born with, right? And fear of sudden noises.
Well,
right?
actually being born must be such a shock to the system.
But also I grew up in a house, you know, being very young, I grew up in a ground floor flat with Ange. And then all of a sudden at 4 years old, I moved to a house in Heswall that had a 3-tiered staircase. So there were 6 steps up, then a little landing, then 5 steps up, and then 5 more, and then a landing. So as a kid, I used to lie on my stomach and peer down through the banisters at the telly in the living room. And this vision, like an MC Escher painting, was always these monstrous stairs were always there between me and the grown-ups having a nice time watching Morecambe and Wise or whatever. This thing in between me being in the lounge room and me being upstairs was this 3-tiered staircase that I was scared of falling on.
But the actuality was, it wasn't the staircase that was stopping you being with the adults. It was the adults saying, get to bed.
Right.
That's right.
But the staircase was physically in between those 2 things. And so that's, I think, probably why I manifested, I'm going to fall downstairs. I actually did fall down the top 3 of these a while back. It was raining and the rain was pouring in through the window. The window was open. And I got up and the top of the thing was slippy and wet. And I slipped and went down on my bum. But fortunately, I've got a well-padded bum, so I'm all right. But, you know, now I've done it, I know what to look for and whatever. But yeah, do you remember that day you guys were here and I was like, you made me go up and downstairs about half a dozen times and I'm fine now.
And then you went to get the heels as well, didn't you?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
so,
that must be what, maybe
10 years.
more. It'd be more than 10 years ago, I bet.
Wow.
It's.
So what is the most common phobia amongst people?
Believe it or not, for us in our clinic, the most common phobia in our clinic is a phobia called emetophobia. And emetophobia is a phobia of vomit. And you might think, oh, well, you know, we don't see vomit very often. However, when somebody has a emetophobia, what they tend to do is they will avoid certain foods because they're worried that they're going to get food poisoning. They will overcook everything. They might not be able to eat out. They may have OCD behavior with
Interesting.
Any bugs. They won't go into doctor's surgeries. They don't want to be around children. A lot of them don't have children. And the list goes on. So that's in our clinic. But generally in the world, the most common phobias would be arachnophobia, which is fear of spiders, acrophobia, fear of heights, claustrophobia, fear of enclosed spaces.
Glossophobia, which is public speaking.
And dental phobia. Dentophobia, obviously fear of the dentist. Those would probably be amongst the most common.
Did you say aviophobia?
I didn't. Fear of flying as well, which is one other one. Those are probably the most common. And snakes as well is another one that's quite common.
Oh, yes, one of my... Next time you come, we'll do snakes.
Okay.
I can't even put my hand on a picture of a snake in a magazine.
Yeah.
So our friend Efrat in Israel, and God bless Israel, she's asking, what do the puke phobia people do if when they're pregnant? But you're just saying they avoid getting pregnant. And
I mean, interestingly, we've had so many people who just avoid getting pregnant. And we've had a lot of people a lot of ladies that we've worked with who've then adopted children, but they've adopted children aged 10 or over.
Yeah. And one of the most severe cases we ever worked with was a case where a lady actually gave her child away. So in answer to your question, Ephra, when people who have emetophobia are pregnant, they just find it incredibly miserable. It's a time of anxiety for them if they suffer with morning sickness. Funnily enough, what's very interesting is that you tend to find that people who have the phobia are never sick. So maybe it's psychological, sort of mind over matter. But a lot of them that do have the morning sickness, they just obviously just try and remind themselves the bigger picture, but they find it tough.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So do you think that people who have that you've treated that have this, were they extremely sickly children and just can't deal with it?
No, the usual start of it is being in primary school. It's kindergarten, and being in kindergarten and just after playtime and being after recess, being back in the lesson, and a boy being sick because he'd been running around too much. A boy being sick, and everyone going,
oh, yeah.
And suddenly, this person who gets the phobia looks and goes, "Oh my God, I don't want to be embarrassed like that. That was really, really bad." And then,
so it's more to do with the embarrassment of being called out in the class than the actual vomit itself. Boy, we've covered everything today, haven't we? Both ends, northbound and southbound.
If I may introduce a lighter note for a moment, Billy Connolly once said, "Have you ever noticed that when you're sick, there's always carrot in it?"
There's always carrots.
Yes. It's true. It's a phenomenon.
I think there's a little side bag of carrots somewhere in your colon that just says,
Action stations. Yeah.
Sammy, our friend in Atlanta, she still has the fear of the dentist. Yeah, I don't love dentists either. I think it's less to do with the actual dental treatment, but just seeing the needle come in your mouth. Because when I was 60 years ago this week, I had my kidney removed. And I was in Alder Hey Hospital for 6 or 8 weeks, and they had me stuck like a pincushion. They couldn't find a vein. In the end, they were giving me needles in between my toes. And at 4 years old, that'll do it, right? Yeah. And so the thing I hate about dentists is seeing the needle come in, and then on the way out the door, the bloody bill.
Yeah. And again, the most common cause of a phobia of dentists is, as a kid, a bit of an antiquated dentist and having dental treatment with a dentist who, as I say, antiquated because it's not like that in modern dentistry, but a dentist who isn't very tolerant or very kind to a nervous child, make the whole process incredibly traumatic.
Right.
And the consequence is fear of dentists.
Yeah, and also, as you mentioned there, through a fear of injections and needles can lead to a fear of the dentist. And, essentially the dentist is the collateral damage here because they've done nothing wrong. But what's interesting, the dentistry has changed so much over the years. And even now the needle, it's like when you have the needle now, it used to be this big long thing that was coming at you. It's just like a puff of air, really, and you hardly feel it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I still can't, needles are still not my friend, but that's
when we come over.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll have a list for you on the front door.
That's absolutely. What's one of the craziest or most challenging, let's say, phobias that you've been presented? Like these guys have a regular slots on ITV, and they send you up in planes with people who don't want to be in the plane, and they give you. Is there one that sort of stands out that was like, oh my goodness, can we actually cure this, and is this going to work?
Well, no. I mean, I don't know. What do you think? I think
I don't know. I think not particular phobia, but one of my favourites in recent times, because no matter where we go, Ruth, people always say, "Can I just have a word? I've got this," and it just happens all the time, which obviously we don't mind about. But we were at a dinner, and we were sat with Charlene Spateri from Texas, from the band Texas, and Charlene was telling us that from being a little girl, she'd bitten her nails. It's sometimes when she plays the guitar, her fingers end up bleeding, and even when she sings, she holds the mic in a fashion that she hides her nails because she's embarrassed about them.
So it kind of like that, so you couldn't see her nails.
Oh.
And again, in the conversation, she said she's had therapy, different parts of the world she's had therapy, and nothing's worked. And I said, well, obviously, Charlene, you've not spoken to us before. And then anyway, we talked about it. It came from childhood, and she said, I don't feel like I want to bite my nails anymore. And I said, well, let's see how it goes. And then a month later, she rang up and said, Nick, I've not bitten my nails. And then like 2 months later, she rang me, and she was one of the best conversations I had in recent times. She rang me and said, Nick, I've got to tell you, for the first time in my life, I'm in a nail salon and I'm having my nails cut. and painted, which is amazing.
And then we saw her, she was actually singing on New Year.
On New Year, she was
on the BBC here.
Yeah, with Rick Astley.
With Rick Astley, and she's there and she's holding the microphone, showing off her fingernails.
Oh, that's got to feel great, though, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, amazing.
I think some of the more unusual phobias we've worked with have been, so I don't know what the equivalent would be in America. You guys will know it's called custard. It's like a vanilla pudding.
Yeah.
Well,
obviously, it's custard, don't you?
Is there an American equivalent to custard?
Yeah, sort of like banana pudding, vanilla pudding.
Yeah. So this lady we worked with, and this went viral actually, because she had a phobia of vanilla pudding, and she couldn't even say the word. And when we said it, she'd go, ugh! And she literally gagged. And she actually said if we could get her over it, she on TV would get in a bath of vanilla pudding. And obviously she did, and we did. And I think another interesting one, and this was another one that went viral quite recently on TikTok, and it was a few years ago, was a lady who had a phobia of Simon Cowell.
I don't blame her for that.
And then another one.
Yeah, I actually had a phobia of pantomime horses.
So costume characters.
Yeah, but actually because she was studying drama at university, and she said that obviously part of what she was doing was involved in pantos, and the pantomime horses were the worst because there were two people in them.
Yeah.
Anything in costume. So we worked with her, and one of the costumes, one of the costumes that they tested her with was a snowman, and it was like a snowman from a horror film.
Evil Dead snowman.
Oh, honestly, it was like
disgusting.
Yeah, it was the most frightening snowman ever. And even if you didn't have a fear of costume character, you'd be frightened of that one.
But she was fine with it, and that actually went viral and was on the Chelsea Lately show.
Oh, good grief! Yeah, it sounds like the John Wayne Gacy of snowmen.
Yeah, exactly.
Honestly,
exactly.
I'm going to send you the clip.
Well, there's a lovely old joke, isn't it? So, I've got us a gig and a play for Christmas. We're going to be a pantomime horse. I'll be the head, and you be yourself. Lovely old pantomime joke. Good grief! So this is now all of this. Your books, your speaking, your tours, your therapy sessions that you do on Zoom. This is now also, you've added to your media empire with a new podcast, haven't you? Handbook to Happiness. Tell us how did that get started, and how have you got your wonderful kids, Olivia and Hunter, involved?
Well, it got started because over the years, we've always said to people, when we're starting in therapy and we go, there's no handbook to life. And wouldn't it be great if there was? Because if someone comes to see us for a phobia, you just turn to page 60 and it talks you through it. If you're going through grief, you turn to page 50, get your heart broken, it's page 25. Wouldn't it be great if we were given that handbook?
Yeah.
And we've talked about this for years and years and years, and we said, why don't we create it? And and we were talking about podcasts, and we thought, okay, let's do it by means of a podcast. So
we started our podcast. It's called Handbook to Happiness, and the concept of it is that it's two therapists, being myself and Nik, a neuroscientist, which is our daughter Liv, who's 27. She's a graduate from the University of Oxford, and also a qualified psychologist. And our son Hunter, who is a doctor of the future, who's studying medicine. And so we decided, well, let's do a family podcast, because then we have got a whole range of ages, from like 19 being our son to prehistoric.
Don't say it out loud, otherwise you'll be finding yourself getting bullied in your sleep tonight.
But the podcast is it is really fun. It's very helpful. It's the four of us, a family. It is literally a family, us as a family, sat around a table discussing a whole host of topics, not just as therapists, but as a mum, dad, husband, wife, brother, sister. That dynamic that comes with that. our own life struggles, how we overcame them, people we've treated. We have guests on, just randomly. We might just ring a celebrity up that we know that's in our phone book and in our phones.
And you know, surprisingly, the kids rat us out.
Yeah, they do.
On things.
They do.
Yeah.
We can't get away with anything.
No secrets anymore.
And then every guest and at the end of every episode, we kind of conclude with, so in our metaphorical handbook to happiness, what is the big tip that everybody's going to share with our listener today? And the topics are vast, from negative thinking to anxiety to having panic attacks, fears, phobias, obsessive compulsive disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder. Tomorrow's episode is unbelievable. Our guest is Sergeant Josh Griffiths, who has been awarded with the Conspicuous Gallantry Cross by King Charles, who single-handedly saved 80 of his battalion during when they were being bombed by the Taliban. He was in a compound, and the Taliban just unexpectedly made a hole in the wall, and they just started charging through. And Josh, despite the fact he had a broken back, he had a broken jaw, I think, was it?
Yeah, and his eye was
hanging out of its socket. He single-handedly was 6 hours as they were coming through this wall. He was shooting, and he managed to save 80 of his battalion. And as a consequence,
that's wonderful.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
So
and he's a Liverpool boy, by the way.
Liverpool.
He's from Liverpool.
Of course he is.
Of course he's a scouser. It takes a scouser, mate.
Helped him with complex PTSD a few years ago, and we talk about that in the podcast.
That's going to be great, and you can get that wherever you get your podcast. Look for Speakmans.
Or you can even watch it because it's filmed, and you can watch it on YouTube. It's Handbook to Happiness Pod, or just Handbook to Happiness wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Great,
and
wonderful.
You are Nik, Nik and Eva Speakman.com.
It's nickandeva.com. Sorry,
Nik and Eva, Nik and Eva.com.
Right.
Well, this has been really enlightening. In fact, I know it's the end of a long media day for you guys. You've been junketing all day. So thank you for fitting us in at the end of the day with a cup of tea. We've got this arse roads.
Save the best to last, obviously.
We're on the wine and you're on the tea. So as our dear friend Paul Moody knows, and who's always watching, and our regulars know, our very special guests get a
limerick.
A limerick. This was penned by Dr.Angie just this morning.
Waiting for this.
Are you sitting comfortably?
Yes.
We are.
Then I'll begin. With a 1, 2, 3. The genius Speakmans have shown how fixing our phobias is known to get us on track, get our sanity back, and right now our minds are just blown.
Thank you.
Love it.
That's great. Well, this is fantastic. Kids, thank you so very much. We can't wait to see you in August when you're over here launching your Hollywood world. And everybody check out Handbook to Happiness and Nik, that's Nik and Eva.com. And everybody's been very enlightened. And yes, it is May is Mental Health Awareness Month. So follow these kids for daily tips on their Instagram. God knows I do. You're my therapist,
me
and
too.
you don't even know it. So
Thank you.
God bless you.
love you
both.
lots. Love to Olivia and Petra.
Yes.
And we'll see you all of a sudden.
See you soon.
Bye-bye.
All right, kids.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Bye.